Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I really hope you're all doing okay and having a great day and an amazing week. My name is Effy and today we are back with another palette play video. If you've never seen one of these videos before, it's where I choose a palette from my collection at random and create 3 looks using it. One on this eye, one on this eye, take them both off and do a third look. So this is look number 3 and the palette we are playing with today is the Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette. It looks like this. As always, I will insert the clip from my last video of me picking this palette. This one. We have the Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette. And at the end of today's video, I'll be picking the next palette to play with. I will be giving you my thoughts on this palette at the start of the video, how I'm feeling about it, and then again at the end of the video to see if my opinion has changed after creating 3 looks using it. I will leave linked in the description box my palette play playlist in case you're interested in seeing any more of these videos. I will also link the video of me testing this palette for the first time, and I will also link everything that is on my face because I do not show you that in this video. But if you are interested, everything on my face will be linked in the description box. But other than that, I think that is all the information I need to give you. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. I put up 2 videos a week and it's all makeup content, so if that sounds like your type of thing, then this is the place for you. Enjoy the video. So let's talk a little bit about the palette before we make a start on it. First of all, the packaging. I just love it. It's so gorgeous. It really is amazing. And then you open it up. And I love the colour scheme. You've got pinks, you've got greens, you've got a black if you want to deepen things up, you've got shimmer shades, you've got 7 shimmer shades and 9 mattes. I love the shimmer shades in this palette. I think the shimmers in this palette are actually amazing. The mattes, I'm not so sure on. I've used this palette a fair few times since I got it. I think it came out last year. And I just find the mattes kind of over blend a little bit, and by that I mean you blend them out and they sort of just all blend into one colour and it just all looks a bit muddy, and I'm not really a fan of that. So because of that, I don't reach for this palette that often, but I do really like the shimmers, and my friend did borrow this palette and used a couple of shimmers out of it and she really liked them too. What I'm thinking of doing today is I'm going to try and create 3 standard looks that I think I'm going to like, so that I can have a bit of a better opinion on this palette, a bit like I did with the Soph Super Spice palette. And I think I'm going to have to try out a few different styles of looks. I'm going to do one that's like a drawn out halo eye. I'm going to do another that's a cut crease because that is sort of a standard look for me. And then the third look I'm going to do, which will be the one I put on both eyes, is just going to be a standard everyday Effy look. I think for that one I'm going to use the sort of pinky tones. I'm going to do a greeny look, and then I'll also do like more of a brown one using these tones down here. So we'll see how that goes. My eye is primed. I pointed to this eye, but I actually meant this eye. So we're starting on this eye, and I've used the Collection Lasting Perfection Stretch Concealer and Eye Primer. A bit like when I did this video using the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette, I am going to be testing a few different eye primers with it just to see which one works best. So we're going to start with this one because this is my favourite eye primer. So it's all blanked out. Let's make a start with the eyeshadow. And we're going to start with this shade down here called Tragic Love. I will say it's very hard to tell between these 2 shades which one is actually the darkest, but I do think Tragic Love is ever so slightly darker, so we're going to start with that one. That shade's gone on really nicely. It's very pigmented. All the shades in this palette are very, very pigmented. I will have to clean the shape up a little bit afterwards, but for now, just packing it on, getting the shade on there, getting the blend right afterwards, and then I'll clean it up. It is a really nice shade and I do really enjoy it. So let's move on to the next shade, which I'm going to take the shade Melody. You can kind of see what I mean about those shades being very similar to each other. They are very similar tones. And I think that may be part of the problem I have with this palette, because now I'm not really sure what to blend this out with. That shade has gone on really nicely. It's packed on. It's done a decent job. Again, the look will need blending a lot more, but it looks fine. Very pigmented, works well. But now I'm kind of stuck of what shade to blend it out with. I have this one here, which is Footsteps, or I have Myth. I think Footsteps might work a bit better, but also it's very cool toned. I'm not too sure. Let's try Footsteps. We'll give it a go. I think with this shade we're starting to see a bit more what I mean about how they all just kind of blend into one and they don't really hold their position. It kind of just all looks like one shade above my crease right now. So what I'm going to do is go back through those 3 shades and try and re-intensify them. I feel like that's kind of improved it, it's kind of made it better. They're still blending into each other a bit too much. I think what I need to do now is go in with a darker shade through my crease just to try and get a little bit more definition going on there. So now on another pencil brush I'm dipping into the shade Hades. There is a black in this palette and it is a very pigmented black. I don't use it that often because I do think it kind of takes over a look a bit too much for my liking, but it is a very, very pigmented black. But let's go in with Hades. I feel like at this point I would normally go back through and blend all the colours again, but I actually think if I were to do that it might just make the situation worse. I am just going to add a touch more of Tragic Love just around that Hades shade to try and bring that colour back a bit, but I'm not going back through all of the shades. And actually I wonder with this palette if maybe the best option is to work lightest from darkest. What I wish this palette had was a super pale blending out shade that sort of matches my skin tone. I know that that's not useful for everybody, and I also know that pretty much every palette has a colour that blends out to my skin tone. But I like that, and I understand it's frustrating for people who obviously aren't super pale and that doesn't work for them. But I kind of need it in a palette, so what I'm actually going to do is just grab one of the palettes that's next to me. The nearest one I have is the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette, and I'm just going to take the shade Snow from that and just blend this out because I really think it needs it. And if I were to be doing this look for my everyday life, I would do this, so it's only fair to do it now. There we go, I've only used the smallest amount, but I really do think that's just helped lighten it up and help it blend out a little bit. I'm now just going to go off camera and cut my crease in a halo eye. I will say halo eyes are not my forte, I'm not the best at them, but we'll give it a go. Halo eye cut crease is on, it's not perfect. I warned you it probably wouldn't be. Now let's talk about the shimmers. Are amazing. I absolutely love them. This gold here, Orpheus, is one of the best golds I have in my collection. I think for this look, I am going... That's another thing, there's not really a dark shimmer to help sort of blend the edges of this, so I'm going to go in with a little bit of Lyre, I think that's how it's pronounced, and a little bit of Muses, and then maybe a little of Eurydice just straight up the middle. There we go, those shimmers are stunning. I will say the copper shade Lyre I think doesn't quite fit in with this palette as well as the others do. I just think it doesn't match the pinky tones, it doesn't really match the green tones. It would work with these, but you'd have to really be making a statement with it. There aren't really any matte copper shades that it fits with, in my opinion. The shade Muse is such a unique shade. It's almost like a greige, as in like a grey, beigey pink sort of shade. And then the shade Eurydice is just stunning. I'm probably going to put that on my inner corner. I think it's so beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is just blend between the mattes and the shimmers. There we go, they actually blended quite well. I think the shimmers really do make me like this look a little bit more. It's just such a shame that I don't think the mattes really live up to the quality of the shimmers. What I'm going to do now is again go off camera. I'm going to put the exact same matte shades on my lower lash line. I'm going to put on a brow, some mascara, a lash, all those good things. And then we will see it as a final finished look. I'll see you in a moment. So here is look number 1. Ignore my other eye, I've primed it already. But this is what we're looking like. I do think when the look's all pulled together, we've got a brow on there, we've got a lash, we've got a lower lash line. I do think it looks a lot better. I would wear this out quite happily. I think it's quite nice. I just hope you can see what I mean about the matte shades and why I just don't love them as much as I love the shimmers. I mean, the shimmers look phenomenal. But let's move on to look number 2. So for look number 2, I've primed my eyes using the e.l.f. Putty Eye Primer in white. I don't think you can get this anymore, and I'll be honest, it's not my favourite eye primer. It's very, very matte. You can see how dry it looks on my eyelid, but sometimes that helps. I actually think it worked really well with the Jeffree Star palette, so maybe this is just better for this eyeshadow palette too. And for this look, I'm going to be doing a cut crease. And I think, again, I might start darkest to lightest just because I think that works better with this primer. And I'm going to be sticking to mainly these shades down here. I might even use the black in this look as well. But we're going to be using the greens, and I'm definitely using the gold in this look. So let's make a start. So we're starting with a pencil brush, and we're going in to the shade Woodland. There we go, as you can see the colour's gone on amazingly, pigmented as always. This is a lovely warm toned green. I think this colour suits a lot of people's skin tones, especially if you've got a warmer skin tone. These sorts of greens will look amazing on you. And it's packed on really nicely, again as always just trying to get it in the shape I want it, and I think it's done a decent job. Now going into the other green shade called Nymph. Again, another shade that's gone on really, really nicely, and actually I think this base might be helping. They're not over blending as much as I was with the other shades I used in my other look. I love green eyeshadow. When I saw this palette had green eyeshadows in it, I got very excited. I wanted to use them, and then obviously when I used them and was a bit disappointed, that was quite sad for me. But with this eye base, they look to be doing a good job. So now we're going into the shade Myth, which is a shade that I personally feel is a touch out of place in this palette. Unless I was to use it by itself, it's not something I'd really reach for, but we'll try blending out these greens with it. That shade's gone on really nicely. The green and the brownie shades obviously aren't going to mix as well as the two greens, so I will have to go back through and blend them, and I am just going to do that in a moment. But first, this shade is really nice. I just don't personally use it that often because for me it doesn't fit with the palette, but I can see how it does fit with these greens quite nicely, and I would use it on its own as just a one and done, or almost one matte shade, one shimmer shade and done sort of look. So now let's go back through those shades and blend them all. I feel like that has helped so much. I feel like the green blending into the brown doesn't work perfectly, but I have managed to get it so that there's not so much of a harsh line, and I think it looks much better. Again, I kind of wish there was a skin tone shade for me in this palette so that I could blend this out a little bit more. But I think for this one I'm not going to reach into another palette just because it's not bothering me as much as it did with the pink look. But yeah, now I'm going to go in with a little bit of the black, which is called Underworld. It's just down in the bottom corner of the palette. There we go. I did want to use the black, but I didn't want it to completely take over the look. But I will say, it is a really good black. If I wanted to turn this into like a smoky eye, I would put the black all over my lid, and that will be it, because it is such a good black. But what I'm going to do now is, again, go off camera, cut my crease. We're going to do a standard half cut crease on this eye, and then we'll come back and test some shimmers. See you in a moment. Cut crease is on. It's not my best cut crease in the world, but it's time to play with some of the shimmers, and obviously I'm going to be using the gold. That's going to be the main colour I use on my lid, and then I'll blend it into Enchanted and then into Forest, because thankfully for the greens there is a nice dark green shimmer, so I'll be able to blend that into the blacks and the greens on the outer corner. So yeah, let's go in with these three shimmers. I'm sure you can tell why I love this gold. It's so reflective and beautiful. I will say it's probably the flakiest of all of the shimmers in this palette. The two greens I use in this look go on a bit nicer, a bit smoother, but my love for this gold shade is unmatched. I don't know what it is about gold eyeshadow, I just love it, and Lois is amazing when it comes to creating gold eyeshadows. In fact, the gold in her Gone Rogue palette is also one of my favourite shades in my entire eyeshadow palette collection. I truly do love it. It does take a little bit of building up, but I think it's completely worth it. And I will say, so far, all the shimmer shades I've used them completely dry. I haven't had to wet them. They've just gone on really nicely, and I really do like them. The two greens also work really nicely as well. I like the fact that she's got that dark forest green in here so that you can blend into the darker shades. I have also just taken a little bit of the matte black just to help blend that a little bit better. But overall, the shimmers in this palette really do save this palette for me. I love Lois and I love her brand, and she's an amazing person, but the shimmers really do save this palette for me. If it wasn't for the shimmers, I probably wouldn't keep this palette, unfortunately. So now what I'm going to do is what I did last time, go off camera, put on some mascara, a lash, a brow, Again, pull the exact same shades along my lower lash line, and then we'll see it as a finished look. Here is look number 2. As always, let me know down in the comment section which one is your favourite, look number 1, look number 2, or the one we're going to do in a moment. I really quite like this look. I prefer it to the first one, even though I feel like this first one is more my sort of colours. These are the colours I'd reach for more often, even though I do love greens. It's the gold. The gold really is, for me, the best shade in the palette. I have got a lot of gold fallout on my face, which is a bit of an issue, but do your eyes first, clean off your face before you do your foundation, and you should be fine. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this look. And overall, I'm kind of happy with this look too. Let's do a third look. And the third look I want to do is going to be something that I would wear to work, because I'm hoping I can sort of view this palette as a work appropriate palette. So if I can create something that's almost work appropriate, maybe blow it out a little bit more because this is still YouTube, but I'm hoping if I can find that, then maybe I'll get a bit more use out of this palette. But let's take off both of these looks and give that a go. Okay, we're back for look number 3. I've primed this eye using the Revolution Prime and Lock eyeshadow primer because that's the one I'm using every day at the moment. And like I said, I want this to be kind of an everyday sort of look. The only 2 shades we haven't used in this palette is Snakebite and Poetry, so I'm going to use those. But what I'm going to attempt to do on this eye is work lightest to darkest and see if that makes any difference. If I don't like it, when I go off camera and catch up the other eye, I'll do that one darkest to lightest, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to start with the shade Footsteps. That's actually a really nice shade. I feel like I've never looked at this shade in this way before. I've never really viewed it as a really nice shade, even though it is. Because I always work darkest to lightest, I feel like when I go in with this, I'm very aware that it's a cooler toned pink, whereas using it on its own, it's just sort of given a very light wash of dusty pink, and I really quite like that. It's so subtle on my skin tone, but you can definitely still see it. It's definitely still adding some colour. I think that looks really nice. I've never looked at that shade like this before, but I actually think it works quite nicely. Next shade I'm going in with is Tragic Love Story. Again, that shade's gone on really nicely. Maybe working lightest to darkest is the secret for this palette, because I feel like you're almost avoiding the over blending problem, because I'm just not blending this up as high into that first shade, and that seems to be helping a lot. And it's working well, it's going over that shade quite nicely. This could be the way to use this palette, and I've just been using it wrong the entire time. And now I'm going in with a little bit of Snakebite. I think this might be my favourite matte shade in the palette. That is such a beautiful colour. It's just the perfect shade of rosy pink, and you can definitely still see it on top of the other shades. I think this is genuinely the way to use the palette, because you really are avoiding the over blending. I am now going to test that theory, because I am going to go back through and ever so slightly blend those shades over again and see if that affects anything. Hopefully not, but let's give it a go. I have gone in with such a light hand when reblending them, because I really don't want to overblend them and for them to all merge into one colour, because so far I'm really liking this. I understand that this is maybe a bit more basic, a bit more boring compared to other looks that I do, but I think this might be the best way for me to use this palette, is for me to view it as a more work appropriate, wearable, everyday palette, because I'm not getting the use out of it that I should be getting viewing it as a YouTube palette, because every time I use it I get a bit disappointed with it, because when I do YouTube I like to work darkest to lightest. But maybe I can get some more Instagram looks out of this palette if I use it in this way. And now on an even smaller, fluffier brush, I'm going in with the shade Hades. I'm just going to use a tiny amount of this on the outer corner, just to deepen it up a small amount. I actually think that looks really nice. I think this is really all I would do in terms of matte shades for a workday look, and I think this works really nicely. I would happily wear this to work, but let's add some shimmers. And again, for this I think I'm just going to keep it simple and just use Poetry and Eurydice. Just use these 2 shades. I might use a tiny bit of Muse, but I think that's a touch too cool toned, so I think I'm pretty much just going to stick to these 2. And there we go. I think those shades work beautifully. I haven't purposely tried to make it super opaque. I haven't cut the crease or anything like that. They just work so nicely to give a nice softer diffused cut crease sort of look. I did go in with a little bit of Muse just on the outer corner, and I also went in with a little bit more of the dark Hades shade just on the outer corner to blend it a little bit more, but primarily I've got Poetry all over my lid and Eurydice just on the inner corner. Now what I'm going to do is go off camera, catch up the other eye, do my full base, all that good stuff, come back and we'll talk about the palette. Again, I think I'm just going to use the same matte shades on the lower lash line. I know it's boring, but for this sort of look, that's what I would do. And I'm trying to convince myself that I can use this palette for every day, and this is what I would do every day. So I'm going to go off camera and do everything, and I'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. This is the third and final look. What do we think? I really like this look. I think the second look might be my favourite just because it has that beautiful gold in it and it's a bit more dramatic, but this really is an everyday work appropriate look for me. I wouldn't wear a glossy lip and I also wouldn't wear lashes, but other than that I would go to work like this. I'd be very happy to go to work like this. I think it's worked really nicely. Again, I think the shimmers really help, but I do quite like this look. So maybe working with your lightest shades first and then working through to your darkest shades might just be the way to use this palette, and now I know that, I will try and use it a bit more. So let's do some final thoughts. I have managed to use every single shade in this palette. Again, I'm not trying to do that in every one of these videos, but if it happens, it happens. I still prefer the shimmers to the mattes. I still think the shimmers are absolutely amazing and the mattes are kind of just fine. I like the colour scheme. I feel so torn with this palette because I do love Lois and her brand. I think she's an amazing person. I think the brand is amazing. And I have all of the eyeshadow palettes she's ever come out with, and that's 4. So it's this one, Gone Rogue, Rose Metals, and Meet Me at Midnight, which is her most recent one. And I love the other 3 so much. I've only used the Meet Me at Midnight palette once, and it's in the same format as this one, but it's very shimmer heavy, which I like because I like the shimmer formula. I don't know what it is about the mattes. Maybe I do just need to work with them a bit more, but they're just not my favourite. But that doesn't deter me from using the palette. Even if I were to come to the conclusion that I'll use mattes from other palettes and then just dip into this palette for shimmers, I'd be okay with that. It would be fine with me. But yeah, a bit of an unfortunate one that I don't love it as much as I love all of her other palettes. But I do truly love the shimmers, and for that reason I'm probably not going to get rid of this palette anytime soon. But as always, let me know down in the comment section which of the 3 looks is your favourite. Let me know if you have this palette, let me know your thoughts on it. But now let's pick our next palette to play with. I have the tin here. I actually haven't forgotten to do this today, which is a big thing for me. Let's open her up and pick one out. And no, I've still not updated this. My new palettes are still not in here. It's fine, we'll do it eventually. Let's go for this one. Okay, so the next palette we have is the, can you see that? Yeah, the XX Revolution Luxe Eyeshadow Palette Vortex. This is a relatively new palette to my collection, so I'm excited to get a bit more use out of it. I've only used it I think 3 times in total, so I will definitely get a bit more use out of it, and we'll try and do some fun looks with that because it's a blue palette with a few oranges and golds and silvers thrown in there, so it should be fun. So there we go, that is the end of this palette play video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. I put up 2 videos a week and it's always makeup content, so if that sounds like your type of thing, this is the place for you. I will leave in the description box a link to the playlist of all my palette play videos in case you're interested in watching some other ones. But other than that, have a great day and an amazing week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!